Russia-Ukraine war, the most intense 24 hours in a way.
January, minus 15 degrees Celsius, 69 Russian assaults in one day, 68 failed, burned vehicles, broken infantry, entire attack waves erased before reaching Ukrainian lines. From Pokrovsk to Kupiansk, Russia pushed forward. The front line gave way, not Ukraine's, Russia's. Putin's offensive is collapsing in real time, not slowing, not regrouping, collapsing. Russian units are advancing on paper and disintegrating on the ground, sector by sector. The Kremlin promised momentum. What we're seeing instead is attrition at a scale Russia cannot replace. This isn't a temporary setback. This is the front line breaking under its own weight.
Across eastern Ukraine, Russia's front line is no longer advancing. It is grinding itself down. Sector by sector, assault by assault, the same pattern keeps appearing, and the results are becoming impossible to hide. Start with Pokrovsk. For nearly 24 months, Russian forces have tried to turn Pokrovsk into a gateway towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. It is not a large city. Before the war, roughly 60,000 residents. But strategically, it matters. Pokrovsk anchors logistics, roads, supply routes. Control Pokrovsk, and you threaten the spine of Ukraine's Donbas defenses. That was the theory. The reality is different. Between January 15th and January 21st, Russian units launched repeated assaults in the Pokrovsk direction, often 20 to 30 engagements per day concentrated in a narrow sector. Ukrainian reporting confirms that the overwhelming majority of these attacks failed to secure lasting positions. Temporary footholds were established, then erased. Russian troops moved forward. Ukrainian units withdrew just enough to expose them. Then drones descended. Mortars followed. Artillery finished the job. Losses mounted. In one documented week alone, Ukrainian defenders reported more than 370 Russian soldiers killed or wounded in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad axis, alongside 80-plus vehicles, including trucks, motorcycles, and lightly armored transports. These are not symbolic numbers. These are operational losses that reduce combat power. And Pokrovsk is not alone. Move north to Mirnohrad, a satellite city that Russia hoped would fall automatically if Pokrovsk cracked. It didn't. Assault groups shifted tactics, switching from armored pushes to dispersed infantry units. Small groups, night movement, motorcycles, foot patrols. It failed again. The casualty rate didn't slow. It accelerated. What we are seeing is not a shortage of Russian attacks. It is a shortage of Russian success. Positions are taken and lost within hours. Commanders report progress on paper. Maps change colors briefly. Then Ukrainian counterfire wipes the gains away. This isn't momentum. It's an army paying blood for headlines it can't sustain. Now look east to Kupiansk. Kupiansk was supposed to be a prize. Russian officials claimed it had already fallen, more than once. But by mid-January, reporting from multiple independent outlets showed the opposite. Ukrainian units were not retreating. They were reclaiming ground. Entire neighborhoods once labeled lost were back under Ukrainian control. Drone footage showed Russian positions collapsing under coordinated strikes. Observation drones were rammed mid-air, bunkers abandoned, infantry fleeing through snow-covered tree lines. What makes Kupiansk significant isn't just territory, it's symbolism. Kupiansk is a rail hub, a logistical artery. If Russia cannot hold Kupiansk, it cannot stabilize supply lines in that sector. And without logistics, there is no sustained offensive, only bursts of violence followed by exhaustion. Across the broader 1,200-kilometer front line, the pattern repeats. On a single day, Ukrainian tracking recorded 69 combat engagements across multiple sectors. Russia initiated most of them. Ukraine stopped nearly all. By the end of that 24-hour period, Russian losses were estimated at 800-plus soldiers, over 100 vehicles, and dozens of artillery systems and drones. This is not normal attrition. This is structural failure. Russia is attacking everywhere and breaking through nowhere. The front line hasn't collapsed in one dramatic moment. It is collapsing because it cannot regenerate faster than it is being destroyed. Every failed assault drains trained manpower. Every destroyed vehicle removes mobility. Every drone shot down is one less eye in the sky, and replacement forces arrive with less training, less cohesion, and less confidence. What Putin promised as pressure is turning into depletion. And in modern war, depletion always wins, just not for the side that starts it. What makes this moment dangerous for the Kremlin is not simply that assaults are failing, it's that Russia no longer has a way to stop failing without admitting collapse. Every army reaches a point where commanders pause, regroup, rotate units, rebuild strength. Russia cannot afford that pause, not militarily, and not politically. Putin has tied the legitimacy of his war to the idea of constant pressure, not victory, pressure, forward motion, even symbolic. Because the moment the attacks slow, the narrative collapses, and the narrative matters more than terrain. That is why Russian assaults continue even when the outcome is predictable. Look at manpower. By conservative Ukrainian estimates, Russia has suffered well over 1,200,000 total casualties since the full-scale invasion began. Even if you discount those figures heavily, the scale is still historic. Russia is no longer losing elite units. Those are gone. It is losing replacement units, men mobilized with weeks, sometimes days, of training. These troops arrive at the front without battlefield experience, without cohesion, and often without adequate equipment. Helmets are mismatched. Body armor is missing. Radios are scarce. Coordination depends on civilian phones and messaging apps vulnerable to interception. Ukraine knows this and designs its defense around it. Russian commanders attempt to compensate by increasing tempo. More assaults, more probes, more pressure. But this creates a paradox. Higher tempo requires higher quality logistics, faster resupply, better communication. Russia has none of those in abundance anymore. Fuel shortages slow movement. Artillery barrels are worn out. Drone losses force reliance on fewer eyes in the sky. And Ukrainian electronic warfare increasingly blinds what remains. What replaces strategy is repetition. The same assault patterns appear again and again. Advance, probe, lose men, withdraw, reinsert new units, lose them faster, and the front line absorbs it all like sand. This isn't a battlefield stuck in place. It's a machine eating replacements faster than Russia can feed them, and Moscow pretending that isn't happening. Now consider morale. Russian soldiers at the front are not blind. They see casualty lists. They see units vanish. They hear commanders promise breakthroughs that never come. Many are fighting their first engagement under conditions that would break veteran troops. Winter amplifies this collapse. Temperatures drop below freezing. Vehicles fail. Wounded soldiers wait longer for evacuation. Simple mistakes become fatal. Ukraine, fighting defensively, can shelter, rotate, and choose when to engage. Russian attackers cannot. Each failed assault teaches Ukrainian defenders more about Russian habits, which routes they prefer, which times they move, which units hesitate under fire. The longer this continues, the more asymmetric the battlefield becomes. Then there is equipment. Russia has lost tens of thousands of vehicles since 2022. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, trucks. Replacements are increasingly improvised. Civilian trucks, motorcycles, unarmored transports pressed into frontline use. This isn't innovation, it's desperation. Without armor, infantry becomes vulnerable to drones. Without drones, artillery fires blind. Without artillery dominance, assaults stall. Each weakness feeds the next, and Russia cannot fix all of them at once. Factories can't produce fast enough. Sanctions restrict components. Training pipelines are clogged. Experienced non-commissioned officers, critical in modern warfare, are gone or dead. Ukraine, meanwhile, has adapted around attrition. Defense first, precision second, counterattack only when conditions favor it. This is not flashy warfare. It is grinding, disciplined, and lethal. Which brings us to the real reason the bleeding can't stop. Politics. Putin cannot declare a pause without undermining every claim he has made since 2022. He cannot announce regrouping without explaining why. He cannot admit attrition without inviting questions about costs, casualties, and purpose. So the orders continue. Advance, probe, attack, even when the line can no longer hold. This is how front lines collapse, not with a single breach, but with a command structure that refuses to acknowledge reality until the ground gives way beneath it. When a front line collapses, the first damage is tactical. The second is psychological. The third is political. And that is where this story is heading. A collapsing line does not mean Russian forces will suddenly flee en masse tomorrow. That is not how modern wars usually break. What it means is something slower, more corrosive, and far more dangerous for the Kremlin: loss of control over outcomes. Once assaults fail consistently, commanders stop believing their own orders. Units stop trusting timelines. Soldiers begin measuring survival in hours, not objectives. At that point, command authority weakens, even if the uniforms remain. Ukraine understands this phase well. Its strategy now is not just to repel attacks, but to shape what Russia is forced to do next. Every destroyed assault limits Moscow's options. Every failed advance narrows the political space Putin can operate within. Russia's remaining choices are grim. Option 1 is escalation. More mobilization. More men sent forward with less training. More pressure applied to a system already breaking. That risks internal backlash, labor shortages, and growing unrest far from the front. Option 2 is consolidation. Shorten lines, reduce attack frequency, shift to defense. But that contradicts everything Putin has promised his domestic audience. Retreat, even partial, undermines the narrative of inevitability. Option 3 is paralysis. Continue attacking without expectation of success. Maintain the appearance of action while bleeding slowly. Historically, this is the most common choice for authoritarian systems under pressure, and it is the most dangerous, because paralysis kills armies quietly. When leaders can't admit reality, the battlefield decides for them. And battlefields don't negotiate, they just keep taking lives. As the line weakens, Ukraine gains something even more valuable than territory: initiative. It can choose when to counterattack, where to concentrate force, when to let Russian units exhaust themselves before striking back. This changes the entire geometry of the war. A collapsing Russian front line also sends signals outward. Allies watch. Neutral states reassess. Arms suppliers calculate risk differently. Confidence shifts, not because of speeches, but because patterns repeat. Inside Russia, the effects will lag, but they will arrive. Families notice rotations shorten. Casualty notifications increase. Promises of victory begin to sound recycled. Economic strain deepens as the war demands more resources while delivering fewer visible gains. The Kremlin will respond the way it always does: louder rhetoric, tighter control, harsher repression. But repression cannot rebuild units. It cannot restore morale. It cannot invent experienced officers. Wars end when one side can no longer convert manpower into momentum. That is the threshold Russia is approaching. Not tomorrow, not with a single collapse, but step by step, sector by sector, as the cost of each advance outweighs what it achieves. This is what a losing war looks like before the headlines change. The line hasn't just given way, it has started telling the truth. So this is the moment we're watching now. Not a breakthrough, not a surrender, but the slow failure of a system that can no longer force results at the front or belief at home. When a war stops producing momentum, it starts producing consequences. And the question facing Moscow now isn't if the line keeps breaking, but how much of Russia breaks with it.